Hello and good evening, everyone. To all of our viewers tuning in from Milwaukee, happy spring, and hopefully the rest of the snow is very much behind us. If you're joining from across the country tonight, also happy spring, and welcome to Milwaukee Rep's virtual home. My name is Njeme Kamara, and I am the Associate Director of Engagement here at Milwaukee Repertory Theater. Tonight's programming is a very special one. Our guests tonight are Voices of Gun Violence panelists. They are not performing. They are not reciting the words of a playwright. They are letting us into their own words, their own stories, and demonstrate the beautiful power of sharing one story, of having control of the narrative. Their beautiful vulnerability is an example of Ubuntu, the Zulu proverb, I am because we are. And they show us that gun violence, being a survivor, and being a resilient advocate for social change is our people's story in this country. And by people, it is across race, gender, and age. Our participants tonight exemplify, as Maya Angelou wrote, but still, like air, I'll rise. And like Alice Walker penned, I'm here. I'm here. And that there is power in telling your story. And most importantly, that there is healing for the storyteller and potentially for the person listening. Our program tonight is backdropped by Dale Orlander Smith's Until the Flood, which serves as one example of the many stories of gun violence in our country. This play does not represent every survivor story, but it does offer social complexities that can be identifiable across stories, particularly when it comes to the intersections of race, gender, and culture. We have a little clip to frame the night. Let's take a little look.
St. Louis Repertory Theater came to me. The idea was to get a sense of Ferguson, how the Michael Brown shooting affected the community, and also again how, I guess, this slew of assaults on black men, murder, specifically the Michael Brown case. So within 3 days, I met with maybe 60 and 80 people to 80 people. I let them talk. I let them talk. I would just throw out a question and just let it rip. I was so aware of people's pain. Was it cathartic, or what did you learn? Was it revelatory? It wasn't revelatory as much as it was I was aware subtextually of what people were holding on to. I knew how much to take in and how much not to take in. I mean, because one could get on overload. I knew what my boundaries were as a theater worker. I had to delve into certain people that showed an array of emotion in terms of that event, how they got through their lives. My investment is more character-based. How does someone get through the world? How does their past play into, what were their childhoods like? What were their parents' childhoods like? Did they become the very thing about their parents they despised? I invest in what I think a person thinks, how they maneuver through the world. And this play will make people feel uncomfortable. And also make them feel comfortable as well. But I think that's what I think it is. It's the kind of piece I think that makes us question. Because there's always self-work to be done. I hope it invokes and provokes conversation. I hope it sparks something within someone. I hope it feels provocative and invokes. Invocative and provocative. That's what I want.
The word that comes to mind is legacy. The legacy of self-hate. The legacy of keeping your place. The legacy of bowing and grinning. The legacy of seeing yourself as a nigger. Being taught to see yourself as a nigger. My God, how I hate that word. How I hate when anyone uses it, white or black. That young man, Michael Brown, was made to see himself that way as a nigger, as non-deserving. He was set up and set himself up to fail, to steal Tipperillos of all things. He graduated high school, was about to enter college in the fall. What made him do that? Who made him do that? I'm angry at him. I'm angry in general. This one day, friend's father gave me a ride home from school, and I'm carrying books, art books, Elizabeth Catlett, Leonardo da Vinci, Romare Bearden. White cop comes up, and I'm scared. I'm so scared. I thought I was going to wet myself. I actually thought I was going to wet myself. He comes up smiling, laughing almost, chewing gum, says, "Where'd you get them books from, boy?" And I said, "School." Got the books from school. And he said, "Well, how do I know you didn't steal them books?" And I said, "Sir, I am not a thief. But if I were, do you really think I would risk my life and or jail over a book about Leonardo da Vinci?" And he stood there and fidgeted. And I could tell he felt stupid, real stupid. He just stood there staring. I was so scared. Didn't know what he was going to do. Then he drove off. And some dudes were hanging around. They saw what happened. They said, "Yo, Paul, you told that cracker cop off real good. You an all right nigga." And that made me cool with some people. They even wanted to hang with me, but I keep my distance. Every day I see that memorial spot for Michael Brown. Every day I see it. And I think, that could have been me. That could have been my blood flowing down this street. That could have been me. And I think I got one more year to get out. Just one more year. Please, God, let me get out. Please, God, don't let that happen to me. I search my soul. I search my soul all the time. Sometimes I can get lost in the past, drink a little too much whiskey. I'm the first one to tell you that. I want the feelings to just float away, wash away. I do feel for Michael Brown and his family. I feel for Darren Wilson. My son may not believe it, but I do feel. I was not there when Darren Wilson, my brother, used his gun, felt like he had to use his gun. I wasn't there. My son wasn't there. Neither one of us were there. We don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. We don't know. We just don't know. You gotta go with the tide. You gotta go with the flow. You just gotta go with the flow.
That was Dale Orlando Smith's Until the Flood. It's available for free streaming on the website allarts.org if you would like to watch the entire production. Tonight is our adult panel, and on April 8th will be our all-youth panel with youth-led moderators. Before we get started with the panel, we have Professor Portia Cobb of UWM's Peck School of the Arts. She's a video artist and producer of short experimental documentaries whose videos and installations have been exhibited nationally and internationally. She will give us more information about the history and the trajectory of the Voices of Gun Violence project. And she will also introduce our moderator this evening, Deborah Gillespie, survivor and founder of Mothers Against Gun Violence. So welcome, Portia. And thank you for joining us this evening. Hi. Hello, Portia. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. This is a wonderful occasion. I just want to give you a quick idea of what the Voices of Gun Violence is and how it has evolved. And so I've written some things down so I don't forget.
Sounds great.
So the Voices of Gun Violence is an interdisciplinary collaboration with UWM professors from the School of Communication and Carroll College, and I'm from the Peck School of the Arts. So it's this interdisciplinary collaboration with Deborah to capture stories. Initially, our goal was to capture these stories, to put them, archive them, and to share them, and to invite others to add to this archive. But really, we've revisited that why we wanted to capture those stories and to have them told, Deborah had already started doing the work. And we worked with her to refine or to edit and to make it possible to collect more stories. But now our focus is on healing and on health, and how these stories have, transformed people through their experiences. I don't know if transformed is the right word, but that through our interactions with people who tell these stories, and through our interactions dealing with empathy, listening to the stories, learning how to engage, how to get people to tell their stories in a way that is not triggering, but is in a way of healing. So that is our mission, and we're writing a whole new mission statement at this time. And I must tell you that Deborah is an extraordinary human being. She is like a wellspring of energy and inspiration. Like, she stays focused, and she continues to connect to others in the community, like the theater. She's always trying to find a way to involve others and to get them to share their stories if they have stories to share. And through this collaboration, we hope this healing begins to create a ripple effect in our communities, and to keep these stories archived so that they are told and they don't become a soundbite, in the media, because people are so dehumanized in the media that you're not understanding that they were human beings, that people were lost to families that loved them. So it's been a journey, and it's been very awakening to an awakening experiential way of connecting to community. The things that we kind of push to the back are now at our forefront. We're always listening for those stories. We're always wanting to know how we can extend ourselves to someone who has to share a story, to share their experience, and to also talk about how they begin to heal. What are they doing to become healthy and to move past, not to forget it, but to use what happened to them as a platform to become whole. And I think I'll leave it there. But Deborah is an extraordinary individual. I'm working with other professors, Dr. Leslie Harris and Dr. Aaron Parcell are not here tonight. Our team is large, it's grown. But they are kind of the engines that began working with Deborah first. So I just want to say I'm really pleased, I'm proud of her, and to see her connecting to Milwaukee in this way, in this creative way, is very nice. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We are just so thrilled to have you all as guests. And there's such beautiful power, as you were saying, in having control of the narrative and being able to share one story. And what does it mean to share? And how can someone else get free also by someone sharing? So.
Right. Thank you. I hope I articulated it well. And I'm nervous I forget what I want to say. But
no worries.
It's okay. And I hope that, Deborah will tell you exactly what she's doing. And this panel is going to be amazing. So
that sounds great. Well, let's bring Deborah on. Hi, Deb.
You're muted.
I always do that. I just take off talking and don't forget to unmute myself. Professor Cobb, you said that exactly perfectly, that the survivors are able to control the narrative. And that's beautiful. I am so honored to be here today. And I'm very excited to introduce our panel. This panel are true examples of resilience. And just thank you for this opportunity, NJ May. This is a beautiful opportunity for all of us, and I'm really excited to get started.
Well, and you, as the founder of Mothers Against Gun Violence, you catalyzed this. So, with your courage and your strength. So, did you want to tell our audience a little bit about Mothers Against Gun Violence?
Just that it's transitioned over the years. We started as a group who were focused on changing gun laws, and I still am an advocate. But my focus now is on focusing on giving survivors and individuals platforms that normally aren't obtainable for them. And you don't have to know anyone to share your story. And I'm so tired, as they are, of our stories being dehumanized. And, Professor Cobb is a hard act to follow. But I will say this, that this opportunity is a blessed opportunity for them. And I just want to thank Milwaukee Rep for feeling that this was a panel worth hearing, and more importantly, for covering Until the Flood. I'm just so impressed with the arts, with this experience. So thank you, Milwaukee Rep.
Well, and thank you for being such a phenomenal collaborator. And with that being said, I think we should introduce our panelists and bring them on. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. Oh, everyone is going to be so blown away by these guys. They're probably as nervous as I am because you feel like you just can't say enough. But I didn't want to repeat what was so eloquently said by you two ladies.
You got this, Steph. You got it. Go for it.
Well, our first panel member is Jasmine Moore. She is the founder of Johan Hope, an organization dedicated to the social emotional restoration of children affected by trauma. Colette Shumpert is an author, mentor, public speaker, entrepreneur, and an immensely devoted life coach. And she is the founder of Loved and Lost LLC. Christina Paris has worked and volunteered for nonprofit organizations in Milwaukee for most of her adult life. In 1990, she experienced a traumatic experience at gunpoint. In her day job, she is a WAVE, Wisconsin anti-violent effort. And believe me, we couldn't do anything without her. Pradeep Kalika is the executive director of Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. He is a published author of The Gifts of Our Wounds, award-winning columnist with Milwaukee Independent, and a clinician specialist in utilizing a trauma-informed approach to treat survivors and perpetrators of assault, abuse, and acts of violence. And last but not least, Keon Jackson Malone is a Milwaukee native and the producer and host of The Man Show with WNOV 860 AM and 106.5 FM. Aside from radio, Keon is the founder of the Village Group established in 2017. The Village Group focuses on neighborhood residents' engagement by restoring fundamental cultural heritage, safe environment to foster community fellowship. Welcome. Welcome.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm just going to dive right into the questions. In Until the Flood, Dale Orlando Smith prompt audience to understand the relationship between racial bias and violence. How has racial bias, shaped your experiences with gun violence? And I apologize for that. And should I repeat the question?
I can answer that per se. I have a very short story about the differences, the different perspectives when we're discussing gun violence, and this is in relationship to the Michael Brown shooting. I worked at a college, and when he was killed, I think Johan, my son, was about 4 years old. And one of my colleagues, we were in the lunchroom, and one of my colleagues came up and she was so upset. She was a white woman. She was upset because her husband made a rational decision to stay home. They were supposed to visit St. Charles, Missouri, but he decided to stay home. He said, I don't want to take my gun with me on vacation. So she was upset. And she was like, no, I can't go on vacation. Why don't they just stop? This is going to make police officers not want to be police officers anymore. I said, well, that's a choice. And my son doesn't have a choice but to grow up to be a big Black man. And that was the first time I had any type of concern about my son growing up in America. And he was only 4 years old. That experience, you know, she was a white woman. She didn't even have children. I was a young Black woman with a little 4-year-old boy, and I watched somebody's baby boy get killed. And so it just showed me some of the differences might be between our races.
Anyone else? How has racial bias shaped your experience with gun violence?
Well, you know, at first I was going to say there was not really racial bias. But then as I think about it, I was going to say it was the environment and the atmosphere, but that's racial bias in the form of systemic racism, you know, where you talk about communities that are despaired. I grew up in one of those communities that fell total victim to what I call the Iran-Contra affair back in the day. You know, we're gonna build the prisons, we're gonna cut the jobs out, we're gonna put the drugs and the guns in the community, then we're gonna go bust them and lock them up and change families and lives. In that manner, as I thought about it, is how it and how it affected my experiences. But other than that, if you don't understand systemics, like most of the people within that environment, you know, it's just, you know, it's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder why I keep from going under. So that's kind of what my experience was with it.
And can I chime in too, Deborah? I just want to say that in thinking about this question, that I know I'm going out on a limb to say this for several reasons, but I'm going to say it, that no one is immune to it, that every race has it. It's just that it's probably more profound in different areas of our country, in different cities and states against a body of people. But for me, it shaped it when I lost my son, I think, for the most part, which was before Mike Brown, which just happens to be my son's name, Mike Brown. So I have another son who was younger. And so now I had to start having the thoughts of, and I actually did a Facebook Live once, and it said, what am I supposed to tell my Black son? So yeah, it does form your thoughts, maybe even more when it's unconscious because you haven't been affected, but it's conscious when you have.
Christina, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, the one thing that I guess when I was assaulted and robbed and raped at gunpoint, I feel that my upbringing helped me get through it because I didn't see that person as, you know, I didn't see his race. I saw his act as being horrible, what he did to me. My assailant was a young Black man. And there were people who came up to me and tried to say they tried to console me, but then they wanted to know, was he Black? And it seemed like they wanted to make that an issue, whereas I didn't. And I was grateful for that because I was brought up in a very diverse neighborhood, and so that I felt that I had a good foundation for that, and I'm grateful for that. And I was really aware of that too. My workplace also, when I did go back to work, I had to take a couple days off because it was just so traumatizing. But I was grateful and was approached by my coworkers who were a very diverse group of really great people, and they were really supportive. And the other thing is, when I did go to court, my DNA had already disintegrated when I went to trial, but I was invited by the sensitive crime unit if I wanted to go to the court to watch the trial. And there were 6 other women that he assaulted whose DNA did stand up. And there were women of all ages, all races, and I met each one of them, and that just reinforced that anybody can be held at gunpoint. It crosses all boundaries, and so I have a different experience than losing a son to gun violence. So I had a different perspective, but I was grateful that I didn't see the race. I saw the act of violence. So that's my input.
May I touch on that one more time, Ms. Deborah?
Yes.
And as I'm sitting here thinking, it's not necessarily racial bias that shaped the experiences with gun violence. It was more so the nature of man, the movies, the music. I grew up watching Scarface, Al Pacino, and The Godfather on television as a kid. I mean, my mother thinks about that now. The movies that we just had playing while we were younger. There was always the cap guns, the firecrackers, the explosives, more so than even racial bias. How do we raise our children up? You go to Mississippi, down south to where, our ancestors were from or our grandparents, it was more survival, hunting, protection. Once again, up here was more the systemics and the propaganda of the media that we fell victim to. And when I just thought about it, because when you're talking about racial bias, I'm thinking all the gangsters we loved were white. And in our community, it was more mob, gangster control, power in the community and the environment we grew up in. Those posters, that propaganda was put out there to make us think we were gangsters, and we ran around trying to have control of areas and properties that we didn't own. That's my experience in the 90s. Milwaukee's up until last year, most deadliest year.
How has your experience with gun violence shaped your view on forgiveness?
I'll answer that first. Unfortunately, I've had more than a few experiences with gun violence, but the most 2 significant experiences with gun violence include when I was a little girl. My father was shot several times. He, however, survived. The second most significant was in 2018 when my son's father was killed. That ignited my drive to found Johann Hopes. And I can't really answer from when I was like 8 or 9 years old when my father was shot. But in 2018, I was in a different place in life. First of all, I was an adult. And my understanding of forgiveness hasn't been shifted since then, since 2018. It hasn't been shifted. My faith commands me to forgive, and I understand that forgiveness does not withhold the consequences that the perpetrator has to face. But what it does is relieves any anger, any bitterness or burdens for me. I don't want to carry that type of stuff in my heart. It was important for me to forgive because my son for a while was holding this vendetta against whomever killed his father. We don't even know. And wanted revenge. My 8-year-old was discussing revenge to these grown men who killed his father. And so I had to display forgiveness and also explain to my son that it doesn't mean that they won't face the consequences for their actions, whether it's here in the world or with me, because I'm a believer. They're gonna face their consequences. And so I didn't want to go around being angry and mad and discussing revenge with my 8-year-old because of unforgiveness. And so I can say that this most significant experience with gun violence has not shifted my view on forgiveness. I often think about whether or not if I knew who did it, would that change? And I pray that it doesn't. I pray that I'm not shaken in any way with my faith with that.
Amen.
I'm going to chime in on that question. I, like Jasmine, am a woman of faith. And forgiveness was not something that I found easy. However, I knew that it was necessary for my own freedom. But without forgiveness, freedom is not obtainable. And healing is definitely not attainable. So despite the gun violence, I had to find within myself to come to a place where I had to forgive my son's killer and began to operate in a place of healing because, again, without it, and I know we have another question coming at some point, it is one of the ways that we heal. It is one of the ways that we heal as a community, as an individual, as a family. Without forgiveness, after such a loss, a family can't heal, which means you go into a lot of reasons why we see what we still see today.
For me, this is a really hard one. My assailant at the court trial, where there, 6 women were in trial, I was just there as an observer because, like I say, I couldn't be one of the witnesses because the DNA had disintegrated. But I knew it was him from the lineup. He denied doing this to anybody at all, even though the DNA said yes. And he was out from, he had been doing this over and over again. And Judge Maxine White gave him the ultimate, he will never be out again, because he turned down treatment in jail for having done it before. And so I would speak to youth offenders in Racine on a regular basis. And that's part of my healing, of explaining, what this act did and how it impacted me and my whole family and the whole community that I'm involved with. And one of the young offenders asked me that, can you forgive that person? And I still can't say an outright yes. And I really tried to understand why I couldn't say yes. And so the young offenders, it was great. It was so healing for me because I think they really wanted me to say yes, because they were offenders as well. And I said, I think the reason I can't is because he didn't own up to it. He denied it. And maybe if he would have said, yes, I did this and I want your forgiveness, I'm hoping my answer would be different. But who I am is that I see good in everybody, and I'm comfortable with, like maybe the question isn't, can you forgive him? Does he have some goodness in him? And I know he does. And I'm comfortable with saying, it's not a yes or no for me. You know, it's like, I know he has goodness in him, and I hope where he is, he's thinking about it and will become a better person. And I myself struggled for years with fear and jumping, you know, so many side effects of being held at gunpoint while you're robbed and raped. You know, I'm never going to be the same person, but I gained strength in being grateful for doing the best I can every day, and just doing whatever I can to make things better. And I guess maybe that's an act of forgiveness in itself. So it is a really challenging question for me.
You know, Christina, I think you did answer the question. If he isn't willing to own up to it, why should you forgive him for something he's denying he ever was involved in?
Yeah. And I know at one point, one of the people in the justice system said, would you like to meet him and talk to him if he'd be willing to talk to you? And I said, absolutely. You know, and I think that would have been a really good interaction. He didn't want to. I think it would have been helpful for both of us. But yeah, it's not an easy answer.
Ladies, if I may, I just want to say, I definitely know all of your stories, and you know, just may the Lord continue to give you all strength in moving forward in life on your path to positive progression. My story is a little different, and that's why I really wanted to start out with that, because my story, as I told you about atmospheres and systemics and whatnot, I grew up with the mantra of a fool. I was in my past life, I was a valid gun handler. You know, I loved people. I was one of the kids growing up. Everything needed tools. Everybody needed a friend. You know, all my pets needed a buddy. But at the same time, I grew up in an environment where, you know, you had to go from being bullied to at least beating up the bully. You know, so with that, gunplay and gun violence was part of the environment at the time. And that's why I started with that for you all. But as far as my view on forgiveness with the gun violence, at a certain point, you wake up, or I woke up and realized that death was final. You know that, but you don't kind of think that when you're drinking Kool-Aid or Wilders, as it was with Jim Jones. You know, when you feed into the brainwashing, the accumulation of the losses, the constant pains, you know, you had people leaving this world, you know, 2, 3, 4 friends every other week for years. And I really think that I came to a reasoning, just, you know, sitting on the porches, reading the papers, thinking about the ones that I've lost, that I don't think no one really wants to kill. I can't speak for everybody, but the majority. But I think that hurt people tend to hurt people. And that's what we feed into. Forgiveness at some point became a point of relief. And it becomes a point of relief for the pressured and the overwhelmed, if they can make it to that. And you hope to find forgiveness before it's too late. You know, I'm thinking about the sister was talking about her son plotting against the grown men. They got his father. You want to find forgiveness before revenge. And I think that the aha moment for me was, and when I say I was good, I don't have a police record like that. I got a traffic, you know, being profiled type of pull them over, take them to jail for traffic violations type of record. I don't have the record that goes with the credit of my name. But one day I finally made it into a jumpsuit briefly. I was in a jumpsuit for maybe 2 days, and I was only there for 2 days because they had the wrong wrist bracelet on me, right? The violent crime that I had committed was a no process, no proof, you get out, but you got a traffic violation. Not really. But here's what's crazy about that. So I'm sitting in jail under this other guy's name with a different middle initial, and I'm in a cell with a young guy that had murdered his girlfriend. The tough talk during the day and when you're around people in the jail, and then the quiet talk that you have in the middle of the night. Yo, OG, what happens next? Yo, what am I finna do now? What's the next step in this process? Young man, I don't know this process. I haven't been here before, and I wish you stopped talking to me. You really should have thought about that before you got mad enough to kill your girlfriend. So what that made me realize was being well handled with the weapons. I really needed to stop handling weapons. I love guns, you know.
So Keon, in reference to how has that helped you shape your view and forgiveness is what?
Here it is. Being a handler with that weapon, I realized that I didn't want to die at the hands of somebody that didn't mean it. And that stuck with me for the rest of my life. I got home, I gave up my weapons. I mean, I literally got rid of them. And I started to work towards forgiveness, because forgiveness can change environments. How I speak to people. Don't be so angry at folks, because you get angry, you get mad, you're frustrated, you got guns, you kill folks, you don't mean it, you spend the rest of your life in jail or you die. That was the long version.
Okay, yeah, that was. But it was a very informative version. Right. I see you made it, Pradeep.
Hey, Deb.
So, perfect timing. How has gun violence shaped your view on forgiveness?
Oh, you started out with a heavy one, huh? Yeah, I think forgiveness is obviously it's different for everyone, depending on the circumstances. And I just heard my man talking, and I think it's something that you can't prescribe, but you got to participate in, and it's a journey that it's a journey. It's some days are good, some days are bad, but it's a process that you kind of try to find your life again, or your freedom, or whatever that feels like. But it's something that it's difficult to say, hey, this is what you should do, or this is how you should do it, because you never know the intimate circumstances with gun violence survivors, and what they've been through. I remember going to Newtown, Connecticut, and when I was there, I was visiting a father who had lost a 7-year-old, and he was really, he's a smart man, and he was trying to figure out a way to inject empathy through the neurobiology of somebody, so brain science, right? And he's trying to inject people. In that case, the shooter lacked empathy, and he had a sort of a mental illness that made him lack empathy. The shooter did. So his life focus became, how do I interject empathy into people that may not have it? And I think that we all try to do that as we work in the community. How do we build empathy? How do we build a society that has a foundation of empathy? But this person was actually trying to interject it into the brain chemistry of somebody. And I just remember talking to him and just what he had been going through, and couldn't help but to think he has taken on a lot. And he you could tell that he was. About a year later, he found he hung himself inside City Hall, and he left a note there. The lack of sort of just, as we talk about legislation, and we talk about movement, and we talk about this, just violence being such an epidemic that it seems so cancerous that you can't do anything about it at some point. But we can. And I don't want us to lose hope that we can't. We can. But he was at that place. And I think when we talk about forgiveness, we talk a little bit about what Dion was talking about, but there's a relief of pain. There's a relief of a little bit of responsibility. There's getting off the gas pedal just a little bit to take a step back and kind of recalibrate your life as you go forward. So, again, it's tough to say for anybody to say this is what you should do, or this is what. But I would say that you know, it's a road. It's kind of a road to a little bit of freedom, and I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that maybe it's an option worth taking, worth considering.
How would you say? How would you say then that gun violence has impacted your lives overall? Does gun violence still impact your life?
Is that a question, me, Deb? Yeah, I mean, I think it affects us on every. I mean, those that have gone through gun violence know that the day after, or the days after, the months after, years after, nothing will ever be the same. It just it engages you to go into some, you know, that engage in that vulnerability of it can happen anywhere. And I think right now America is feeling that, and for both for the good and for the bad, because I think that a long time ago we would think that, okay, this is going to happen. Violence and gun violence only affects those in certain neighborhoods, and so our consciousness and our mind could get off and say, okay, well, you know what, that's never going to affect me. Well, now you're seeing it happen in movie theaters. You're seeing it happen in churches, in synagogues, in masjids, and temples, and schools. You're seeing it happen, you know, shopping malls. You name it, and it's happening, and it's affecting everyone. So this epidemic, now I think there's, until you feel vulnerable enough to know that it can happen to you, sometimes you don't call for policy changes. You know, I'm thinking about January 6th and what happened at the Capitol. We knew that by that time that Donald Trump, as president, had been stoking violence against lots of people who were very vulnerable. But until it happened at the Capitol, you know, there wasn't that call, that immediate call of, okay, this is how bad it's gotten. So I think for the good and the bad, it affects you every single day, and it should affect America. I think that, you know, we think about the foundation of this country. It was founded on power over. So when we think about some of these incidents that are happening, whether they're happening in Georgia, Atlanta, you know, Milwaukee, whether they're happening, you know, sorry about that. If they're happening, where it's usually a power over model, and the perpetrator or person that's doing it is oftentimes trying to have power, and it comes from a place of behind a gun, and you know, even as we think about, you know, I was in law enforcement for about 5 years. I think there's even a calling, like I wanted to have power. So when we compensate for the lack of power with trying to have artificial power, not compassionate power, we have what we have in America, and that's a toxic soup of misery.
Colette or Christina?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So how has that experience affected me? Well, I'm sitting here.
Continue.
It continues to affect me by the fact that when I see other mothers have to go through the very thing that I have had to experience, it weighs heavy on my heart. It in some ways have allowed me to get involved in some things I never once even thought about or even cared about. You know, legislation, laws, why they need to be changed, what is the flaw in them, to understand what I need to vote for, why I need to vote. It has impacted and continues to impact my family. Although I may be walking in a level of healed and from or by the situation and through it, all of my family isn't. There are my son has siblings who still suffer in a way that that is not pleasant. So when you talk about how it continues to form my experiences. You know, the organization that I formed because of it allows me to delve into people's lives that I wouldn't know had I not lost my son. It helps me to show people how it's possible to heal, how they can have life after loss, and in lost and dark spaces where hearts are broken and most people can't get in. It continues. I always say that Michael's life lives on in so many ways that I would never have thought that night it would have. I thought it was over. I thought everything was over. But there has been so many things that were birthed from it. I know that I wish I could take it all back and do what I was doing and be whatever direction. But the continuation of this, his life said, you can never let this go. You can never allow his life to be in vain. So you'll be active in a whole lot of arenas that I never, ever thought about or considered.
Jasmine or Christina?
Well, it affects me daily because I'm raising my son without his dad. So things are more difficult than they should be because my son doesn't have his father, and the way that he's reacting to the trauma affects the house as a whole. And the effects are not always bad. One of the things I did when my son was struggling, I wanted to know, what is he dealing with? Because I haven't lost a parent. So I don't know what it is. I haven't experienced what he's dealing with. And so I started to educate myself about the trauma. And when you start educating yourself about trauma and then trying to help your child heal, it's really introspective. And so it hasn't been all negative effects, because I've unfortunately dealt with trauma as a young child. Like I mentioned earlier, my dad was shot. Thankfully, he survived. But those other instances in between my childhood and up until his dad's murder, I can't identify or how exactly it affected me. But I'm sure watching my dad being nursed back to health, I'm sure that being robbed at gunpoint for a leather jacket at the age of 13 or 14 affected me in some way. I just was I was unaware. And I didn't have, my parents didn't try to like.
I am so sorry, Jasmine. I've got to interrupt because we've got to wrap up.
Oh, okay.
I apologize because that was, you about to share something that you didn't share before, which was even about your dad and gun violence. So, but I'd like each of you to tell everyone how they can reach you and your organization.
Oh, well, you can reach Johann Hopes. You can search us on Facebook. The name is Johann Hopes, Journey of Hope, Advocacy and Nurturing. The website is www.johannhopes.org. And there you're able to email us, and the phone number is listed there as well.
You can reach me at We Loved and Lost or Loved and Lost on Facebook. The website is welovedandlost.com, and the phone number and emails are listed on the website.
And I work at Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort, waveedfund.org. And we're very active with legislation and put on educational events. And we have volunteer opportunities, more so pre-pandemic, but there are some now too. So I'm happy to help, and I just anything I can do. Thank you. And thank you, Deborah, and thanks Milwaukee Rep too so much. This was a great opportunity. And also I want to say how wonderful it is and how courageous everybody is on this panel. That what we went through is horrifying, but also so much good came out of it too. That Jasmine and Colette, I really appreciate you saying what you did. Yeah, I can't imagine losing a son. So thank you what you did.
Well, you can reach me every day, every weekday at WNOV Radio 860 AM 106.5 FM, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or via the TuneIn app. We have talk shows where engage the communities, speak your truth. You have a community voice, and definitely on Friday mornings, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time on The Man Show.
Thank you so much. And you can reach me at Pardeep Kalika on Facebook or Pardeep K at interfaithconference.org. I just want to say thank you to this discussion. I think it's a meaningful discussion that we need to have, and we need to have it going forward. If you are going through, and I think Jasmine, as you were talking about, just learning about trauma and the role that it plays within our bodies, take it one day at a time, one step at a time. Let's educate ourselves on how it affects us, how it shows up, and let's keep having these discussions. I know that the solution is out there, and people, this is work that we can all do together. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on our panel and for giving us your hearts, your minds, your spirits. You've really, with your sharing, have really given us some beautiful perspectives to think about. Gun violence in this country is truly an epidemic, and it's so inspiring to see how you continue to move through the world and take action despite trauma, and how to move, figuring out what is forgiveness, what is healing for me, and taking it step by step every day. And I'm thinking so much about how do we look at artificial power versus compassionate power? And what happens when someone needs that power and needs to put it behind a gun? So thank you for so many of the points raised. So Colette, Keon, Pardeep, Christina, Jasmine, Deborah, Portia, everyone who is working behind the scenes and making sure that Voices of Gun Violence is a successful project. Thank you. Let's keep archiving. To learn more about Voices of Gun Violence Project, and if you yourself feel inspired to share your story, you can learn more at the website, www.uwm.edu/Gun Violence Project. And you can also learn more about some of the organizations mentioned today, and we're going to put some of those links in the chat for you all. As mentioned at the beginning of our programming, we do have a part 2 to this event. So on April 8th, we will have an all youth panel that is youth moderated, because it is just as important to hear from our young people who too often feel unheard and unseen with their own stories. So please be sure to come back and tune in on April 8th at 7 p.m., same place. And everyone, have a good night. And we will see you for part 2. Good night,
Thank
panelists.
you
So much. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.